For centuries before modern sealants, medieval builders raised halls, bridges, barns, churches and fortifications that endured rain, frost, insects and, well, time itself. Many of these structures still stand today, their wooden elements intact despite never being painted, tarred or chemically treated. This was not luck, and it was not primitive ignorance of decay. Medieval builders understood rot with a practical clarity modern construction often lacks. They focused on moisture control, airflow, wood selection and structural design rather than surface coatings. Their methods remain some of the most effective ever developed. Why medieval builders treated rot as a design problem, not a material flaw. Rot requires three things: moisture, oxygen and organic material. Medieval builders accepted that wood would always provide the organic component, so they removed the other two whenever possible. Instead of trying to seal wood completely, which they knew would eventually fail, they designed structures that denied rot the conditions it needed to start. This mindset shaped every decision, from forest selection to foundation layout. You know, the way medieval builders selected their trees and the timing of their harvests quietly determined just how long a building would last. They would always opt for slow-grown trees from dense forests, rather than those fast-grown timbers from open land. The thing is, slow growth produced a much tighter grain, which in turn absorbed water more slowly and was far more resistant to fungal penetration. Trees were actually cut during their winter dormancy, when the sap content was at its lowest. Sap, as it happens, is rich in sugars that feed decay organisms. So, by harvesting in winter, builders managed to reduce those internal nutrients before construction had even begun. And, the same principle still holds true today. When selecting lumber for outdoor or structural use, it's best to choose dense, slow-grown wood and allow any sap-heavy material to season thoroughly before putting it to use. Now, seasoning wasn't seen as a mere delay, but rather as a multi-year investment in durability. Fresh wood, you see, rots quickly because its internal moisture remains uneven and unstable. So, medieval builders would air-season their timber for extended periods, sometimes several years, always storing it off the ground, under shelter, with a steady flow of air moving through. It was a patient process, but absolutely essential for longevity. This slow drying allowed moisture pathways to collapse naturally and stabilize the internal structure of the wood. Unlike kiln-dried lumber, which dries quickly and can reopen to moisture later, well-seasoned timber resisted reabsorption. Anyone building with wood today can apply this by allowing natural air drying whenever time allows, especially for posts, beams, and exterior elements. How elevating wood above ground defeated rot before it could begin. Direct ground contact was recognized as the greatest threat to timber. Medieval builders avoided burying wood whenever possible. Structural posts rested on stone pads, rubble piers, or compacted gravel beds that drained water away. Even small elevations dramatically reduced moisture exposure. When wood never touched soil, fungal growth slowed to a crawl. Modern builders can replicate this by keeping posts above grade, using stone footings, and ensuring water drains freely rather than pooling at contact points. Joinery really stepped in as a clever strategy to prevent rot, taking the place of metal fasteners. The thing is, metal fasteners tend to corrode over time and actually trap moisture, which just speeds up decay around them. But medieval builders, well, they were quite resourceful. They relied on joinery techniques like mortise and tenon joints, wooden pegs and scarf joints, all of which naturally shed water and help keep the timber sound. When it comes down to it, roof design was actually more crucial than wall protection. Medieval builders had this keen understanding that most rot begins from above. So they used wide roof overhangs to shield the walls and beams from direct rainfall. And those steep roof pitches? They made sure water ran off quickly, stopping it from soaking in for too long. Plus, drip edges were added to direct water away from the main structural elements, keeping everything much drier. Now, let's talk about how orientation and placement played a crucial role in controlling moisture exposure. Structures were positioned thoughtfully to take advantage of the sun and the prevailing winds. You see, south-facing walls dried much faster, while those damp, north-facing exposures were often shielded or built with stone rather than wood. Floors, too, were raised above the damp ground, and crawl spaces underneath allowed airflow to circulate, keeping buildings drier from below. Medieval builders, well, they never expected wood to survive without a bit of care. They avoided the idea of false permanence and instead designed their structures to be accessible for regular inspection and repair. Damaged components could be replaced individually without the need to dismantle entire buildings. This practical approach prevented small problems from turning into catastrophic failures. In contrast, our modern reliance on permanent coatings often delays detection until the damage is frankly quite severe. So, regular inspection and minor adjustments remain, even today, one of the most powerful strategies for preventing rot. You might wonder why these old methods still outperform many modern solutions. Well, modern paints and chemicals try to isolate wood from its environment, but given enough time, those seals always break. Medieval builders, on the other hand, accepted the environment and worked with it. By carefully controlling moisture, airflow, structure and placement, they simply removed the conditions that rot needs to survive. And that, my friends, is precisely why untreated medieval timber still stands strong centuries later. If preserving real historical knowledge is important to you, do consider subscribing to Ancient Know-How. Share this guide with your fellow history and survival enthusiasts, and help keep these proven methods alive and understood for generations to come.